Hi guys, it's been a while since I've made another video before because I had put the cold air intake on the car. That's the AEM cold air intake, and I was going to do a review for it once I put it on. So I have put it on a few weeks ago, but I haven't had a chance to make a video about it because a couple of reasons. One of them is I was trying to get the recall thing sorted out for the car because my air conditioner was having issues with the computer, which is known as the amplifier. It was blowing hot air. So long story short, it was a recall, so they fixed it under recall, and then I got to drive the car a lot more, and from that I gained a lot more experience with this new cold air intake, this one over here, to be able to compare it with the other two types of intakes I've had on the car. So I think I'm now in a position where I actually basically could compare the three different types of intakes that I've had experience with over the last 8+ years. So obviously I started off with OEM, and then I went into the AFE powered Takeda cold air intake with the blue pipe, and then now I'm with the AEM cold air intake. I did try to retain as I said in the previous video, I really wanted to really keep in keeping with the blue theme over there. The blue pipe looks super nice, so I wanted to retain that. But if you're considering any one of these cold air intakes, I just want to make sure everybody understands that this pipe over here, it's longer. So the pipe that you have that with the Takeda one, that's shorter. So it comes up to over here. So essentially we need a coupler to make it, and I didn't want to go with that because a coupler doesn't really give you that solid, they're not mated solidly together, if that's a term. You basically have so just to put it simply, you have a rubber coupler here, and then you have the pipe in the middle, so you don't have the pipe solidly connected to the box. So there's going to be some vibration in that case, right? And it's going to have some unpleasant experience, and I think it probably sound weird as well. I know somebody else had done it, and they put like a long coupler in the middle, and then they put the clamps on it. So I guess probably that's what works for them. I didn't really. I mean, I love the blue color. I really wish I would have retained it, but this gray, it actually looks a lot more darker than it is on the video. Maybe because of the light and stuff. It's actually more like dark, not quite graphite, but pretty close to being like. So it's showing up a lot lighter than it actually is. And then this is carbon fiber over here, and then on the side you have aluminum, and on the back is aluminum. So this is like your sealed air box. So that's the big difference between this one versus the other two variants, the AEM, sorry, not AEM, the OEM and your AFE power. They both, the OEM has the OEM box, and then you have the AFE power, which retains the OEM box, which is what my biggest selling point was when I originally bought it like 5-6 years ago. That I wanted to retain the OEM box, and I go into deep lengths about why exactly. Initially I thought that was the right thing, but over time I learned more about this intake system. Then I was like, no, I think I'm not going to lose low end torque with it, so I ended up switching with this one. And I had some, there's some cheapness going on with the AFE power. I talk about that in the other video. The airbox is kind of made cheap plastic, and then clamp, So in this case, this is the box, and this gets rid of the dual intake system that the OEM, that the AFE power also retains. So the source for air is only this scoop over here. The scoop sucks air from the outside, and then it goes into there, and then it goes through the intake and goes into the engine after that for air to fuel mixture. So it's only taking cold air from outside. The engine runs extremely hot. This is a very, very high strong engine. It runs very hot. You could feel the heat if you're standing even like about 3 feet away from it. It's a very high strong engine. But the good thing is that despite being high strung, it has good displacement, 5 liters. So it allows you to really, the mods really do make a difference. You feel it with every single modification. So in this one, now that I have driven it quite a lot, I can basically tell this is my own opinion. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. I believe this is a much better intake system than the AFE power that I had before, and also the OEM. The one thing is that it doesn't take any hot air inside at low RPMs before below 3600 RPM. You basically, for the OEM, it actually closes it. So yes, you don't get hot air, you're getting air from this scoop. But as soon as it opens it, I think RR Racing did some um, data logging on it, and then they actually figured that even after when it intake opens, it still is running pretty hot. The engine bay is still pretty. The air from the outside hasn't really started taking over. Now you have the scoop over here that is the heat extractor, supposed to extract heat, but it's not. It's just at 3600 RPM, it's just not enough velocity of air coming from outside to really get the heat extractor to really start creating that vacuum at the top for it to suck out. So they were actually calculated, it was like I don't know, 120, 130 Fahrenheit, even at 4000 RPM. So that was the biggest turning point for me. I was like, okay, I need to really block air from within the cabin, engine bay. So that's what this does. So this one is like it's completely sealed from low RPM all the way to red line. So it's all across the rev range. So sound wise, let's talk about sound first. Sound wise, I think it's which is what my main reason was, that I really wanted to have much more richer sound. I think the AFE power was good. It was kind of better than OEM in terms of being able to pipe in intake noise into the cabin, but because it was based, it was routing through the channel of the OEM intake box, it still was very, very close to OEM airbox. And I did feel that when I put it on back in the day, I did feel like that it had a bit more mid-range punch. They claimed it was like about 10 wheel horsepower more, and that's what the AFE power claimed, but I can't substantiate that. As opposed to the exhaust, where you really feel a significant difference, I couldn't feel that big of a difference with that one, and probably I would say like 4 wheel horsepower, maybe around there. Now with this one, going back to the sound, now when we will probably divide it up into 3 different sections. The first is low end, and then you have your mid range, and then you have top end power, right? So your low end torque, I think from 0 RPM to, or 1000 RPM to 3000 RPM, I believe this one has a lot more richer and more textured sound going into the cabin. So because in the other 2 instances, OEM and AFE power, you have the intake box closed, your primarily sound is coming from the exhaust. Your intake is very, very quiet right before, unless you disconnect the vacuum pipe, and then you have it open all the time, and then you would get some growl. But in that case, the problem with that one is you're getting hot air into the, and I did that at one point when I bought the car new, and it was causing a lot of loss of torque. You could feel that the car was gutless below 2,000-3,000 RPM. It felt like there was just no torque, and then suddenly it would start to really wake up at 4,000, 5,000 RPM. In this case, it's not. I think the low RPM from 1,000 to 3,000 RPM, the sound is a lot more richer. You're getting a lot more of that deep growl. Some people might call it drone. I'm not sure, like, if people why dislike that. I like that bassy. I think I was really missing that. I was like, I wanted to have that deep sound, right? With the exhaust, because this NVIDIA exhaust doesn't have any. It's a higher pitch exhaust. It tends to come alive over on the RPMs, and it's more really melodic and very smooth and very more high pitch side. So I wanted to have some bass to mix in with that high pitch sound, and then the intake was not quite getting that. I could get it to do that under load, which means basically if I'm at low RPM, high gear, right? Like if you're at, like, for example, 20 miles per hour and you're in third gear, so you're at low RPM, so you're gonna lug the engine. So when you lug the engine, you're gonna have a lot more, you could get more bass to some, but I wanted to have it like when you're actually in the right gear, right? So you wanted to have some depth and some, so that's what this thing does in the, so at slow speeds you have a lot more richer experience. So in the mid range it begins to sound a little, a little bit more closer to OEM and the AFE power, because then the intakes flaps in those cases have open. So in the mid range, you're beginning to sound similar. And then you have the third one segment where you have a high RPM. At that point, that's where the biggest difference is. So over there, I think that's where the most experience lies. That's like over 5,500 RPM all the way to the red line. I think the red cutoff on down dynos in shows about 7,400 RPM something cutoff. So in that case, it's a lot more intense, and that's, I'm so happy with that you get that with this intake. I was just missing that because I came from a Corolla XRS which had a 2 ccge engine, and when you lift kicks in at 6,500 RPM, it was really a lot of very intense. This one was all exhaust. The intake was, you could hear the intake because obviously it's getting piped in, and then there's that speaker thing that goes on. But the problem is that it always felt like it was coming from a distance. Now it could be because you're sitting over there and then the intake is over here, whereas in my Corolla XRS the intake was on the same side as the driver. I'm just only theorizing there. Or the fact that it's a luxury car, so they have so much insulation that the pipe sound, it's traveling a lot in long distance, and it's coming only from the pipe, and then that's where getting piped, and that's where you kind of feel like it's coming from a distance. You don't have that rich sound experience. So that's what I got with this one. With this one, I call it, this is what my term is, I don't know if that's makes any sense, but I call it 3D effect. So the sound is like you're enveloped by the sound around you. That's exactly what I was looking for, like as going back to my Corolla XRS example, because that one had no sound deadening or very limited sound deadening, and the intake was on the same side. And when I had the engine intake on it and lift kicked in, you got this really, you got enveloped into that sound. And I'm happy that this one has given me that. Like, it's like now it's with the exhaust and the intake sound enveloping you. It's this 3D surround effect that's being created from this intake. That's a huge plus. I think the sound quality itself is very, very nice. It's not like unrefined. It's more, it does have some metallic because you got a aluminum box and carbon, so it does have that aluminum the metallic texture to it. And it is very mechanical sound. Like, it's just like sort of like how pistons are really spinning very fast. So it gives a very intense high RPM, high revving experience. I think this is just perfect. Sound wise, I think this pretty much exactly met all of my expectations. I would say even exceeded my expectations. Power wise, they claim that it adds, the dyno that I think I put it up in the dyno that the box contained shows about, I believe, like 15 or 16 wheel horsepower on the dyno picture. I'm not sure if that's the case. Like, I'm sure they have their data. They obviously wouldn't want to get sued, so they must have some actual factual comparisons of the stock dyno. I mean, they do overlay the stock versus, so they would have some factual data on how they did the dyno. I don't know if it's that much. Like, again, exhaust is probably much bigger difference, but I do believe that it does give you a more more mid-range, and then I think at a high RPM it spins up to redline, I believe faster. But the thing is that I've already got quite a few mods on the car, right? So once you mod your car, the changes, the deltas between mods, they start to get less noticeable. Especially if you're starting with a bigger mod, like I did the exhaust, and then after that I did the throttle controller, I did the intake, which obviously now it's this one, and then I did the RR Racing software tune, which gave some more power, and I could feel the difference when I did the software tune. And then basically I did the pulleys. So the pulleys have made the car and spin up so fast that I don't know. Again, the problem is that I don't drive the car that much, so it's kind of hard for me to do a before after comparison. What I might do is probably I'll try to do another draggy and then try to see if how the numbers compare to the last numbers I had. Obviously, I'm as you guys know, it's like it's high altitude. This is Calgary, Alberta, so it's like at 4,000 feet above sea level. And with the pulleys, I think I was at about 12.3, 12.4, adjusted for sea level. As the numbers are adjusted with the factor, so it's high 11s, I would say. But maybe we'll see if I could get it down to 12.1 or 12.2 at 4,000 feet density altitude, which means probably about 11.6 if I were to at sea level. So everything loses power as you go up in thinner air. So even turbo cars, they lose power as well, not quite as much as the naturally aspirated, but it's not that big of a difference because I have run against a few turbo cars, and you would think probably something that puts out 400 horsepower with the turbocharger would be closer to this, which is around close to 500 RPM, 500 horsepower stock. But no, that's not the case. I think there's also the factor that when you're going faster, you're getting a lot more airflow and stuff, and naturally aspirated, like high compression engine like this, it loves thick air. And then also the fact that the fuel as well, that I put octane 94 for a high compression engine like this. Fuel makes a big difference. I put octane 91 in this one and 94, and I can tell you there's a very significant difference between the two. So if somebody's living in California and they only have octane 91 available to them, the car is not going to perform like this. I'm not saying that it's going to give you more power, it's just that it will give you less power than what it's supposed to. So basically, if it's like 472, then you would be getting like 460 for around there with the octane 91. Because in Japan, they tune it for the engine compression of this one. So I believe the octane 93 is what really the right fuel for this car is. I put octane 94, and then anyone who puts octane 91, it's still premium technically. It would not cause any knocking, it won't cause pull timing, but I believe you do have less punch. It's just not as lively. So anyway, so that's kind of like what the comparison is for the three different intakes. Now, I think somebody might wonder like what exactly would be the right choice. So if let's say you actually really like to keep you like the OEM look, and you have the OEM dual stage box, that works perfectly fine. It's a pretty good intake system. And then you have AFE power. If you like the blue pipe, and like originally how I wanted to really keep the OEM dual stage airbox, if you like doing that, then you would be happy with the AFE power intake. I don't have anything negative to say about it in my 5 years of experience with it. It's just that it didn't really feel like it was worth the amount of money I paid for it. That was like, it was cheaper than this one, but I think in this one the cost is worth it. So, and this one, if you want to reduce some weight, because the intake box is fairly heavy, it's not that light. So in that case, this one really does the job. And then basically you're only getting cold air from outside, and you're removing the OEM dual stage air. So if you want to have sound throughout the entire rev range, then you would probably want this one. It looks super nice. I really like this carbon, but it's not really clean. I might put black caps on them, and then also the I think you get like some decent power increase as well. But the thing is that the sound, it sounds glorious above 5500 RPM, and the last 2000 RPMs, but 5500 RPM and the 2000 RPM above that, it sounds amazing. It's really complete the experience, and that's what naturally aspirated cars are for. That basically you want to really have a lot of power, and then you want to have like the total experience and the sound and the response to go with it. With turbo cars, you would get a lot of power and you get all the tunability, but you don't really quite necessarily have the with some of the lag and response might be a little bit less than less than ideal. And also the sound is obviously, I've never been a fan of any of the turbo cars, that their sounds, unless it's an exotic like a Temerario or something, but that's a completely different ball game. But most of the cars that are like in the $150,000 range, I think the turbo engines just don't really seem to really, because it gets muffled by the exhaust gases being routed back into the turbo. So that really creates a barrier between the sound, that really it just doesn't have that, it doesn't have that clear piston, and the noise that you have, it just gets muffled because the exhaust gas is getting routed into the turbine of the turbo. So I think that's pretty much it for now. So I'm actually I'm planning on doing a POV video. I did actually do one, but apparently the problem with the videos is that it's, unless you have a very good sound quality, it's very difficult to really have the video do justice to what it is. So I've actually ordered another POV sunglasses that I'm gonna try it out with that one and see if I could actually really get the sound quality to come through in the video. And basically that's kind of like what my hope is, that I can really show what the real sound and real life is through the video. It just doesn't come across, it just doesn't do justice with the other, whether it's the phone mounted or any other camera that we have normally. So in this case, hopefully that would do that, and I will upload the POV video in the next couple of weeks or so. So yeah, I think that's kind of like what but if you have any questions, then shoot the question in the comment section, and I would be happy to respond to it. If you have all of these products, they generally get designed for RCF, but the engine mods for RCF are, they could actually be ported over into GSF, and also I believe the IS500, not in the LC500, because the LC500, even though it's the same basic engine, but the engine layout is different. The intake system in that one is it's different than, it's got two pipes running. They're smaller, but the throttle body is smaller, but it's got two intakes. So if you have an GSF or IS500, this intake would work for that. I think the same thing with the exhaust as well. The NVIDIA exhaust that I have, that one, a lot of the GSF and IS500 owners, they sort of like MacGyver that over to those cars, because both of those cars are longer. So the GSF is about 1 foot longer than the RCF, and the IS500 is about 2 inches longer than the RCF. So they have to go and extend the mid pipe to really make that exhaust work, but they have made it work. So it's this, in this case, this would be a straight fit into an IS500 or a GSF. So yeah, until next time, ciao, bye.